Hello and welcome to Red's Business and Technology Podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Barnes.
And I'm your co-host, Brad Ferris.
Another co-host, Nigel Hui.
Today we're sitting down with the Managing Director of Arowana, Michael Hui. Michael, thanks for coming on the show, mate.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Mate, let's set the scene onto what we're going to be speaking about today, which is a bit about what you've done in the capital investment space and your journey, and also the ICT training space. But let's start with the background. What did you do way before before what you do now?
Yeah, sure. So I guess what was interesting is at uni I did IT and law, and so then went off and became a strange combination, but went off and just became a very sort of normal lawyer without really applying much of my IT skills. And that's relevant as we sort of get towards the end point. Went into law, always found the commercial side more interesting, had grown up in family businesses, and so enjoyed hearing about clients' problems in that space, but less so dealing with the legal side of those, I suppose. And over time managed to find myself in a few more commercially focused positions, and then ended up for a point in time running my own firm, had a client, Arowana, that I was doing some work with, and after a while they asked me to come on board, help them out with a few things, and then that sort of grew over time. And I think it's been 12 years now that I've been at Arowana, and have sort of focused on a few different areas. We, for a while, looked at some venture capital space, but our more traditional mandate and what I focus on now is sort of lower mid-market acquisitions and businesses that we can put together into platforms.
Why did you make the jump from only law firm to Arowana? Why?
Yeah, to be frank, I just don't like dealing with the public. And look, client-facing is very difficult, and I have a lot of respect for people that can do that. But if I was going to be solving problems, ultimately I wanted to be solving, I guess, not my own problems, but problems that were part of the organisation that I was working for or contributing to. Cool.
Mate, do you want to dive a little bit deeper into EdventureCo, what you're doing with that?
Yeah, sure. So EdventureCo is an investee company of Arowana, and it's an education platform that we've grown over 7 years now through a buy and build strategy, primarily through acquisitions. So I think we've done now 8 acquisitions over 7 years. That started in 2016, in June 2016, right through to now, where we closed an acquisition in August and another in October in 2022. And so we've built a business now that is consisting of 3 divisions: digital skills, soft skills, and future skills. And mainly focused on the corporate training market, so B2B business, but with an element of B2C as well.
All right, well, cool. Let's unpack that a little bit. But maybe we'll start with if you want to introduce Lumify, which is formerly DDLS. Anyone in the IT space probably heard of them or done some training through them over the years, I'd say, that are listening. Do you want to unpack who they are, like size, what they offer, employees, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so Lumify is Australia's largest IT training business, and the market for Lumify is in vendor certified training. So we partner with people like Microsoft, AWS, Cisco, all the sort of big technology vendors and framework vendors. So when it comes to things like Process, iTool, Prince2 and things like that. And we mainly cater towards IT professionals. So people looking to continue their progression through their career and to constantly upskill, whether that's as they gain more seniority in their position, or new technology rolls out, and their organisation might be changing from on-prem to go to cloud or multi-cloud or whatever the case might be.
Probably a lot of growth, I'd say, because we say in the show a fair amount that IT 20 years ago used to be very much you had one IT guy who was across everything, but these days it's getting so broad with cybersecurity, cloud, networking, app and endpoints, and it's really very hard for a small team to keep up, and no doubt that means they need a lot more training, so surely it's a good future ahead there. But do you want to start with, I guess, why Arowana bought Lumify? What was the reason, and why did you see that as a good opportunity?
Yeah, I guess we saw a lot of strong tailwinds, as you just described, in the technology industry, in the way that was becoming more and more a part of just doing business and enabling businesses to grow. And so, the business, when we acquired it, had been part of a much larger systems integrator, Dimension Data, and it was a small part of that very large business, and so it wasn't really or didn't receive a lot of focus. So we saw an opportunity to materially change and improve the way it operated, but then also to move it towards riding some of these waves of technology as they came through. And so at that time, this was about 5 years ago, cloud was really starting to, cloud had been around for a while, but really starting to gain acceptance. And so the business has always had a very close relationship with Microsoft, but there was an opportunity then to expand that to AWS, Google Cloud, virtualization, VMware, people like that, and keep growing that out.
Okay. I've got a lot of questions I wanted to unpack, but do you know, Brad, do you want to start first?
Yeah, so Michael, I obviously really respect the partnership and the friendship and everything we've worked together. Technology is something that has become ubiquitous in people's lives. You've got unique skill set in that you've got legal and technology. Talk to us about what are sort of the trends you see organisations with training, technology, due diligence. We've obviously worked together on a couple of DD projects, but are you seeing any common trends that are leading towards why training and more internal upskilling is really, really critical for the future?
Yeah, we all know, and it's a bit of a truism, I suppose, that the pace of technology change is just ever increasing. And so therefore, along with that comes a requirement to train people, whether it's new people coming into an organisation or them fundamentally changing something they're doing. We see a lot of organisations of late been rolling out agile, or as I said, still moving from on-prem to cloud. Sounds remarkable, but it's still happening,
Yep.
and the majority of processing is still done on-prem, right, for most organisations around the world. So we think that's got a way to run, but now then, all the talk's multi-cloud, private cloud, all this sort of stuff that's happening. You guys would know much better than me. So we've seen that wave, and that wave is continuing. But then of late, of course, you don't need to be an expert to see everything about the sort of cybersecurity risk that's been going on. And so the rise of cybersecurity as a training segment has just been remarkable over the last 3 to 4 years. New vendors coming on, basically into sort of a greenfield environment. And so we've really had to build out a portfolio there. And you talk about sort of specialisation, and some of these roles probably didn't exist 2 or 3 years ago, right? And I think the next one that's coming is AI and the way that's affecting business. And so I think the importance is ever growing. We see it in the businesses we own. If I sort of go a little meta, when we acquire a business, we think the fundamental difference we can make at the sort of scale and size of businesses we buy is implementing that sort of digital transformation for the businesses, and partnering with people such as yourself to help the business do that. And the best example I can give is when we started acquiring the education businesses, we took a view that we wouldn't change any of the back-end systems that they had in place because those projects can be a bit painful, they're timely, costly, they never run on budget. But after a while, we came to the view that we had all this sort of siloed data, we had these archaic systems. Just because someone knew that system, they didn't know how to use that system, so we had no redundancy across the organisation at all. And to support all that was just becoming more and more difficult. So we just ripped the Band-Aid off and said, no, we're going to go to all common systems across the organisation. And we've got businesses that might have a revenue of, say, 4.5 million to businesses that have a revenue of 50 million within the group. So that sort of you have to be careful how we do that. But the way it's fundamentally changed our business is just remarkable. And the data we can now get access to, big users of things like Power BI and the like, and the way in which we can then make decisions, the way in which we can be more efficient in the way we run the business, and then things we can build on top of that when new technology comes along. We're not building on top of this really archaic thing that is going to be really difficult to support and really costly to build on top of.
So on that vein, can I ask a question? If there are 3 things you see as a common trait when you're looking for an opportunity to buy an asset or do some sort of deal, what's 3 areas that you see business owners tend to be quite deficient in? Touch on cyber, cloud, all of that, like BI. What are the common trends?
Yeah, I think technology, full stop. So quite often everyone's got an accounting system, which is commonly Xero. So they're pretty set there, and we ultimately moved them to a more sort of sophisticated accounting system appropriate for the size of our business. But accounting system is probably one they can take care of. We've bought businesses with no CRM. So each salesperson has a different system or a piece of paper or an Excel sheet or a Word doc or a PowerPoint doc or a Notepad doc. So we've seen that. So CRM's a big one. You've got to be selling stuff to make money. No ERPs, or if they do, very archaic ERPs. And it can be hard because a lot of the systems that everyone hears about are really designed for larger enterprises, and they're very costly to roll out, very costly to support. And then probably the third one is pretty much little to no thinking about the cybersecurity risk. Everyone sees it, but no one really knows how to do it. And basic stuff like multi-factor, just non-existent. Sharing of passwords, extremely common. The old Excel doc with all the passwords saved in it. Pretty much every business we've bought has that.
Yeah. Not surprising we hear these and see these stories every day, unfortunately.
It's really basic hygiene stuff.
Yeah.
But you can't fault them. They probably have a relationship with an MSP that probably just does the basic help desk stuff for them, and they don't know what they don't know or might need. And that MSP, which wouldn't be Red obviously, but that MSP is not interested in really implementing any fundamental change in that business or advising them on anything. It's just sit back and hope they don't sort of move somewhere else, I suppose.
Well, that's a big change that we're seeing everywhere. And a lot of MSPs, as you said, pivot to just doing a help desk provider, right? Get the monthly fee, do the help desk, that kind of thing. And then cybersecurity, that's like a whole nother too hard basket. Don't want to go there, don't have the skill set, don't want to employ cybersecurity professionals, which are so limited in Australia, right? So, I think it's kind of getting to a point where almost a lot of businesses need a cybersecurity company of some kind engaged, much larger, like we do here for our current managed customers, and or having that as a service they provide, but separate just for cybersecurity, instead of relying on an internal IT team would just focus on operations, or an MSP who's got a couple of staff focusing on keeping the lights on.
Oh, I agree.
That is a worry, right? Because everything you've just both said is that you think about, we want to do the best for our customers. We want Australia to be such a great country and economies to be strong. But if you've got MSPs that are deficient in the fundamentals like cyber, and then AI, the waivers come in, like what you're doing with Lumify, the training, like that is essentially. It's an essential service. Everyone has to embrace it to become better and uplift all of economies, right?
The analogy is in the law, right? And back in the day, everyone just used to be a general lawyer. Everyone used to do everything. Things weren't overly complicated. There was far less legislation around. You could just go and see a lawyer and they could solve any of your problems or try to solve any of your problems. IT is no different now. Now that sort of all these technologies have proliferated, all these new risks, because with that new technology comes new risks. Yep. You now need specialists. And so just like a law firm, they'll have guys that work in commercial, guys that work in corporate, guys that work in litigation. Some other firm will do the crim stuff. Some other firm will do the wills and estates. I think it's no different now in the IT space.
So the flip side, though, I'm interested to get your opinion on this and what you see. We see a lot of, on our end, trying to educate, implement cybersecurity services, and on the other side of the table, people just don't have the appetite to spend the money. And so communicating, the risk reward scenario has been, I don't know, is that fair to say, a challenge? And people don't know how to price it. They're like, okay, well, if I spend this amount of money, what kind of protection do I get? Does that really cover me? Like, where does it end? Almost. So I don't know if you had some thoughts on that in some of your businesses, like how you guys approach it.
It's hard, I guess, because you're selling something that doesn't really have an ROI.
Yeah.
It's not a revenue generating thing. It's just a cost. It's a bit like insurance, but everyone's happy to have insurance, right? And I think it'll just get to the point where they have to. And certainly the customers that we sell into, and Lumify is primarily selling into enterprise and government, their boards know that they have a duty to their shareholders to do this stuff. And if not, when they inevitably get hacked or inevitably there is an incident, they'll be in the line of fire. So that comes down mandated from a board level. And now we're seeing legislation, right? And it's the same reason that we see, I guess, a lot of forms of insurance. It's either legislation or contractually obliged to have it if you want to be in business with other companies or with the government. And so I think that will just inevitably become a part of a feature and a cost that everyone has to wear. But yeah, until then, there's a bit of an education platform to do.
Yeah, it's definitely hopefully something that a challenge that you guys can help with in your what you provide around cybersecurity training, because I think internal IT teams are definitely struggling getting the right advice from external parties and also the right people internally to actually help when it comes to cybersecurity. And I do like your analogy you had with law actually, because it's so true that in IT it was just an IT generalist. You had a bunch of generalists. That was your company or your department internally. But now there's like product engineers, help desk engineers, cloud engineers, cybersecurity analysts, and that kind of thing. So it is getting similar kind of specialists.
Yeah, I mean, when I did my IT degree, you could do 4 majors, like information systems, information management, which is not really even sort of IT per se, software engineering and network engineering. That was it.
I I had one more AI, which I actually did. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did the AI one.
In 1995, mate.
Very forward thinking.
1992, mate.
What was AI in 1992? I don't even know.
Being facetious.
All right, so let's strip back to the training, ICT training industry in Australia. Just to get some scale there, how many employees in Lumify and how many competitors do you have? Because I actually have no idea.
Yeah, it's so one of the attractive parts of buying the Lumify business 5 odd years ago was that it has consistently been Australia's largest for a long period of time.
Okay.
We have about 100 employees in Australia, but we have also acquired a business in New Zealand that is effectively the Lumify of New Zealand, is now Lumify New Zealand. But they have 3 campuses across New Zealand. And then we've also gone into the Philippines as well, where we have a campus in the Philippines.
Okay.
Provide training there.
So it's online and in person?
Yeah, so, and I guess this is very sort of COVID driven in some respect, but pre-COVID, 90% of our training was done face-to-face, and all of our training, not all, but 95% of our training is instructor-led training. So there's a live instructor there, not sort of self-paced online training. So pre-COVID, 90% of that was face-to-face and 10% was virtual. So you could dial into a Zoom or a Teams thing, no matter where you were. COVID came along, that switched around the other way. And where it's starting to equalise out now is about 50-50. And we basically run hybrid sessions. Yep. So there might be an instructor in our Brisbane campus delivering to 2 or 3 students. There'll be a student in our Adelaide campus dialing into that. And there'll be a person in Sydney at home or at work dialing into that as well. And we're able to do that internationally now. So someone in the Philippines can dial into an Australia, someone in New Zealand, or vice versa, however you want to set that sort of matrix up.
Was the Philippines organic or was that acquisition?
That was organic. So we did a JV with a local partner up there.
Yep.
So we've got 60% of that up there. We've had, Philippines can be a tough place to do business. Obviously COVID came along, typhoons, we had a volcano, you name it. It's been difficult. Earthquakes, yeah. But really getting on track now and starting to see, and it's just the commonalities we see between the markets and the ability to say to a Philippine student, well, we may not be running that course in the Philippines this month, but guess what? There's one you can dial into in New Zealand. There'll be a bit of a time difference to deal with, but you get the opportunity to do the course if you want to do it right now.
I want to pick your brain a little bit now, you've been in this for a few years, around internal IT teams. Why do they find it hard to get time to do training? Because I get a lot of feedback from IT managers and CIOs saying, yeah, well, we want our guys to develop and build out our skill set so we can do more stuff internally, not rely on partners so much and yada, yada, yada. But it's very hard because they're trying to keep the lights on. They've got projects they need to do, and you typically hard to get funding for stuff. So I guess in order to pick your brain on that topic, like why do you think they find it hard to do more IT training?
Yeah, I guess what's the alternative to taking the time to do that? I mean, they can do self-paced online stuff, but we know historically that doesn't have great completion sort of rates. People drop out or they don't really pay attention. If you're doing that at home at night after a full day's work and you've got a kid climbing on you and things like that, it's pretty tough to concentrate on that. So we like to think that rather than try and do that and space that out over 3-4 months or whatever it may be, with questionable likelihood of completion, how much of that sinks in, versus take whatever it is, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, carve that out, go and do that in an instructor-led environment. The benefits will actually sort of sink into that employee, and that will come back to the business in terms of whatever technology you're dealing with, whether it's new technology. And I think it attaches, as part of an employee sort of employment proposition, that training piece is so important, because if the employee is not getting that from where they are, then they can go somewhere else to get that. And in the current environment, where are you going to, find another skilled employee that's not going to want the same thing anyway?
So what advice would you have to a CIO who's struggling to get the rest of the management team buy-in on pulling some engineers out of the field to essentially go and do training? What advice would you have for them?
Well, I think the longer-term benefit, and it depends upon the nature of the training, right? If it's cybersecurity, and I think, and I'm not a sales guy, right? It's a pretty easy sell, but I accept that doesn't make it necessarily an easy decision for the business to invest that time and money into it. But think of the risk you're mitigating by employing or training your guys in that area. But then in other areas as well, like the efficiencies that come with better use of the technology ultimately hit the P&L. And so there is an ROI attached to that training that can be established.
Probably another one to add on to that would be that if you're using a third-party company just to do short projects all the time versus skilling up your internal IT team, it's going to be more cost-effective in the long run. But obviously, you got a lot of money out and time is put aside, and I think that's what I see is a lot of internal IT teams. They're like, yeah, I would love to do more training for my guys, but we can't because they're already on 2 projects and they get 20 tickets a day, for example. So, but I want to pivot a little bit to cybersecurity, which you mentioned. The training courses that Lumify provides, what did that look like today versus 5 years ago around cybersecurity?
I would say we had practically no cybersecurity training 5 years ago.
Really?
I think 1 or 2 vendors at the most.
Yeah, right.
But it wasn't that talked about. It was still a fairly niche area, I'd argue, within this sort of technology space. But of late, we now have Australia's largest offering of vendors and courses, and everything through from sort of some of the end user cybersecurity training that is not really for technical people. It's more cybersecurity awareness training through to the highest level of sort of technical stuff you can do. And that's whether it's technology based or sort of the frameworks. And, we recently just went through our 27001 audit as well. So we're now accredited ourselves. So we're sort of, practicing what we preach as well around the importance of that.
What other training, apart from cybersecurity, is trending up these days?
Yeah, so the waves are sort of cloud, as I spoke of before, and that's just continued. And I think Microsoft dropped its earnings release yesterday, and the continued growth they're getting in their cloud division is just remarkable, given it's not exactly coming off a low base. It's still growing at such a high rate. Cybersecurity, obviously, just continuing to grow. And as I said, we've come off practically a non-existent base to grow where we are today. I think the next wave is going to be in AI, and I think particularly if you look at Microsoft and their investment in OpenAI and the way they're starting to, or the way they're about to roll out some of those tools that are integrated into Office 365 and the sort of tools that everyone already uses, I think that's the next big wave. And where ultimately the training we offer is authorised training. So when Microsoft rolls those courses out, we'll be first in line to start delivering those.
Copilot courses will go nuts, I think, when it first comes out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Brad, any questions you've got for Michael before I carry on?
No, you're on a roll here, mate.
Answered it all.
Yeah.
I did want to ask, actually, the current state of the AI courses you've got. Have you got any AI courses?
Yeah, we do. There's some of the more technical ones. So Azure already has some. It's not my space at all, but some elements on its platform and some courses that we already do offer. But they've traditionally been very niche. And we run some webinar sessions occasionally to brief people on what these are, free just sort of lunch and learn sessions. And usually you might get 20, 30 people attending those. The last one we ran on one of those courses got 300 people to attend, which I think just shows the general growth in interest, because now they realise that, well, it's fine for the company to be talking at the front end, all these things we're going to be doing, whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot, but somewhere along the line, they're going to have to support that at the back end as well. So all their engineers are going to have to start looking at that as well. So yeah, we do have an existing offering, and we've also just launched in our other business in the digital skills space called Nexecue, which is more end user apps training. So things like Excel, Power BI, Word, non-technical users. We've just launched a ChatGPT course there, and we were just getting constant requests from clients asking, do we offer this course? So we've developed our own course and rolling that. It's actually just launched this week.
Brad, keen?
Fantastic.
Probably a power user
Yeah,
already.
I could probably come and help instruct.
Don't pay him enough here. We'll bring you on as a contract trainer.
How do you,
Pro bono, mate.
How does Lumify do that process of finding out what new courses they're going to bring out? Is it just from demand and what comes in, or what vendors like Microsoft push out? How does that work?
Yeah, so we are primarily an authorised training partner. So we're very focused, and we think that gives the highest quality of training. So if you've got the training content delivered from Microsoft via us, then naturally they're best placed to deliver or to provide that content on their own platform. There are providers that do what's called sort of grey training out there, where it's not authorised training, and they may develop their own content in that. But we are therefore primarily vendor-led. When a vendor launches a new course, then that goes on our portfolio. When there's a new technology area, we go and seek out who are the key vendors in that space that we can partner with. And it's just been a feature of the technology industry for decades that they have these sort of training ecosystems where they have authorised training partners that they can trust and deliver and meet whatever their qualifying standards are to deliver that. Occasionally, there's just no vendor, or take something like ChatGPT, there's no ecosystem around that, so you have to develop your own content. But primarily our focus is on vendor authorised training, as I said, for quality reasons.
Yeah, it makes sense. I thought you'd have a pretty rigorous process on that because technology, like I said before, changes so much.
I do have a question. I'm curious, and you may not be in this much of the detail, but what does that look like? Are they giving, like, obviously you're going to have your educators or instructors, and then we have course content creators, I suppose, on staff. Are they working with the vendors, or do the vendors have a course outline that then you just tailor to your audience? What does that look like?
It varies vendor to vendor. Some vendors will mandate you must use their content and only their content. And so effectively we have a trainer that is just using slides and course outline, not even repackaging it. This is the slides that they've presented, and they must be, that's one of the terms of the agreement. Other vendors will develop the framework, then they'll license third parties, maybe one, maybe more than one, to develop content. So then you go to one of the licensed content providers, and that's more in their process areas. So you things like Prince 2 and areas like that. I could be wrong, they may do it differently, but it tends to be more in less the technology, more the process frameworks. And you'll license that from the content providers, or you can try and develop your own. But like we've said several times, the technology changes so rapidly that the job of keeping that content up to date with whatever is happening in the underlying software or technology is really, really difficult. And you don't know quite often what's coming around the bend. And so who's best placed to do that? The actual software provider or technology provider.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get them to provide the content, that's kind of win-win, really.
Yeah, and what's changed a lot in the industry was, when everything used to be a software package that you got on floppy disk or CD, there'd only be different versions every, 12, 18 months. You might get a patch occasionally, but it was probably to patch something that was broken, not to really add a new feature. And so courses didn't change until those versions changed, and so it was fairly consistent rhythm. Now, I mean, there are new versions dropping every week, if not more frequently in a lot of these things, right? And so that also means it's harder and harder to keep up to speed. And so having that authorised content just makes it so much easier.
Oh, just following on that. So do they? So if you've got say it's a software platform, will they include in the course like a student or a trial or a demo license if required?
Generally not, because the nature of the stuff we train is not end user, so it's more for the enterprise to roll out. So yeah.
I'm just trying to think.
But the way we train it is on labs, so the student gets access to labs, which is a simulated environment.
So you've got the gear in there. Okay.
Yeah, and it feels like they're operating on whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But it's obviously just a simulated environment, and that way, that can set the challenge. It can break something. It can set the task for them to do, and then assess whether they've done it, rather than a sort of live or a live environment that is a real environment, but it's not set up for assessment or training.
So potentially, if it's a hardware software vendor, you'd have equipment as well on the campuses.
Yeah, or we can simulate that through a lab provider.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, it helps separate, right? The also ran some of the true vendors. I know when we were with DDLS, 20 years ago, Cisco, if you weren't certified through DDLS, you can't actually sell this or service a Cisco equipment, right? So the cowboys that pretend they know how to use a Cisco iOS versus the ones that are fully certified, it was actually a really good differentiator.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's no different today in the sort of software piece. Would you rather have the Microsoft certificate if you're working on Azure, or would you have the College of whatever
YouTube
sort of certificate? College of YouTube. Yeah, exactly.
That's a good point. And I was just thinking that those AI courses that you are planning on running, I feel like you'd have to update them every 2-3 weeks because the amount of AI tools.
Well, wouldn't the AI update the
course? Maybe, but that would just get rapidly changed because the amount of new AI tools you see in like that sales and marketing space alone just coming out all the time is just nuts. I don't know how you'd possibly keep up.
Yeah, and we've considered that in terms of our ChatGPT course, that we're realistic about how long we'll run off our own content until some of the content providers get up to speed and start issuing their content. And that'll come with a cost. Obviously, if we've built the IP ourselves, there's no licensing cost associated with that. but we're willing to bear that cost to make sure it's relevant and up-to-date stuff.
Yeah.
Michael, changing gears for a second, something that's common theme in your life has been transformation, right? Transforming businesses, using technology as a transformation tool, transforming education. Energy. I know you've played in that space a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've done in that energy transformation space?
Yeah, sure. So one of the other investee companies of Arowana is a business called VivoPower. And VivoPower initially started very focused on the solar space and primarily in the US. For various reasons, primarily Trump, the investment environment for solar became very difficult. And so we pivoted the business, so transformation one, we pivoted the business into something else in that space. And we identified an opportunity that there were a lot of hard to decarbonise sectors that were trying very hard to decarbonise. And in the Australian context, a very obvious one is sort of mining and resources. So, whether it's what they produce or how they dig it out of the ground and produce it, it produces a lot of carbon emissions. And they're big companies, they have ESG goals, and they're willing to spend the money to try and solve this problem, but it's difficult. And so we found this Dutch business that was doing EV conversions of utes, basically, and primarily Toyota Land Cruisers, which is basically the de facto standard light vehicle used in the mining industry pretty much globally, but definitely in Australia. And from a Toyota perspective, they've been slow. I think it's fair to say very slow in terms of major car manufacturers to jump on board the electrification wagon. And they've been looking at hybrids and the like. And they're not going to, the Land Cruiser in terms of the Toyota offering is a very low volume seller compared to, the Corolla or whatever it may be. So the mass passenger cars are obviously where they're going to be focusing their time and effort. So we saw an opportunity in that space. So we acquired that business in the Netherlands called Tembo. And over the last few years, we've been refining their product in terms of a conversion kit to convert Land Cruisers for two EVs to then use in these difficult sort of mining environments, whether it be underground or above ground.
Fantastic. More transformation. Love it.
Still waiting on your order.
Yeah, still waiting.
Sorry, see, you're in the queue.
Well,
just keep getting pushed down the queue. And
I just did 4,000 k's round trip to Birdsville, towing a caravan. Fuel bill was pretty high, mate.
There you go.
Although I don't know if there have been too many charge spots along the way.
You can set some solar panels up and we'll sort you out.
Yeah. Mate, Michael, what's next for you, mate? You've obviously there's a huge, more opportunity with what you're doing with Lumify and the other companies you're investing in. What else have you got exciting happening in the future? Yeah,
well, I think from an EdventureCo perspective, we still see a long way to go in that business. And digital skills, we own Australia's largest, we own New Zealand's largest. There are always little things we can add on to that business, but it's tough to start to find areas to grow there. So, we did the Philippines a couple of years ago. That's really starting to hit its stride now. We think expansion, Southeast Asia in particular, can make a lot of sense, and we can bring a lot of strengths to those markets in terms of sort of how we do things. And also as that business grows and we cover different areas, the offering to customers it grows as well. And as I talked before about scheduling and things like that, it just really helps. We have an international schedule now. When we bought that business, we had a state-based schedule. So if you're in Queensland, you just looked at the courses that were available in Queensland and that was it. Then we went national, now we've gone international. But outside of the digital space, there's any of the academic literature on the future of work talks about two types of skills. You need digital skills, which we've talked a lot about naturally here today, but the other one is soft skills. And so they're the sort of human skills that aren't going to be readily replaced by ChatGPT or robotics and the like. And they're going to be really important to ensure that the role you're in is not one of those roles that is vulnerable to being replaced. And so we have two businesses in the soft skills space. We have a business called ENS, which is a negotiation training business, and we have a business called Plain English Foundation, which is a plain language communication business. We do a lot of work with government and big corporates in both those businesses, and I think there's more work to be done not only in growing those businesses, but continuing to look at other opportunities in the soft skills space where we think they're going to continue to grow in importance.
Awesome. Appreciate you coming in. I think there's going to be a lot more growth in that space. So appreciate the insights you shared today. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Jackson.
Thanks, mate.
Right.
Thanks, Michael. The titan of transformation. That's what I'm going to call you.
I'll let others use that description.
Thanks, mate.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks.